drawn a line. I've been baptized by the body of church and the flame you are. I'm born.
Good morning, everybody. I'm a brand new man. That is an awesome song by Luke Combs and the Brooks and Dunn reboot album. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today we're here to talk about the war between the whale and the elephant. It's the end of the classical age and the beginning of the Peloponnesian War. Now, this PowerPoint is going to cover a majority of that. In fact, we're going to get all the way through the Peloponnesian War. So sit tight, sit back, relax, and let's check out history through the lens of this great conflict. All right, so let's get started. Tensions rise. Following defeat of the Persians, the Athenians created an alliance of city-states to help in the defense of the Greek mainland. Now, the Athenians had had Athens destroyed. The long wall which had long protected them had been destroyed. Their town had been burned. In fact, they blamed other Greeks for this. They certainly blamed the Macedonians for this. And so this created a lot of tension on the Greek mainland. Sparta hadn't been destroyed. Corinth hadn't been destroyed. Even Thebes had skipped the wrath of the Persian army. But Athens had been absolutely crushed. And so they had to find a way to defend themselves. It's very resemblant of other times in history where buffers have been put into place to prevent invasions. If we can go back to the end of the Second World War, the Russians or the Soviet Union refused to leave Germany because they were afraid that if they ever left that area again, there would be another invasion of the Russian homeland. And that for them just wasn't acceptable. Same thing here. Athens is terrified that the Persians are going to invade again. And so they need to create a group of Greeks who are willing to stand up and defeat the Persians. And this group of Greeks is called the Delian League. And the Delian League, as it was called, was led by Athens. Each city-state in the league provided Athens with troops and tribute. The purpose of the league was to deter Persian aggression in the region. So the whole purpose of this is to keep the Persians out. It's to show this united Greek front. But really what it does is it kind of creates Athens, or turns Athens into its own form of an empire. All right, they get to more control of the Aegean Sea. They get more control of the Hellespont and even parts of the Attica. So, I mean, or not just parts of Attica, but even parts of Anatolia. So we see Athens growing more powerful. We see Athens gaining more territory, and the Delian League is this device that's going to deliver it. Now, the Spartans, of course, did not trust the Delian League. Well, going back to before the Persian War, we remember that the Spartans don't trust anybody, especially not the Athenians. And so, of course, they're going to form their own league. And this league is called the Peloponnesian League. And that is made up of city-states that are on the Peloponnesus and Corinth, and that sometimes Thebes. Sparta really can't trust Athens ever. They think that Athens is trying to take over all of Greece. That may have never been an aim of Athens, but the Spartans fear that that's really what's going on. Again, they don't trust anybody, so they form their own league, and their main goal was to counter the power of the Delian League. So the Peloponnesian League doesn't really care that much about Persia. They're more concerned with Athens. This is where the tensions really start to rise. All right, and again, we know that this stuff is creating a lot of turmoil, but at the same time, we have explosive growth. The Delian League brings a lot of wealth into Athens. In fact, Athens becomes the center bank for the Delian League. The money was supposed to go to the defense of Greece, but the Athenians used it to really boost the classical age during this time. It went into their arts project. It went into their architecture. These incredible columns right here, which are carved in the shape of Athena. I mean, absolutely astounding achievements in architecture. This isn't just for the purpose of holding something up. This is built to look good, all right? This was built to look very nice. And so with this construction, with this creation, we get to see that Athens is taking a lot of the money that they're making off the Delian League, and they're just reinvesting it in themselves. The differences between the leagues. Now, the Delian League had a very large, well-trained navy. In fact, It was the largest navy in the world by far. And again, these were made up pretty much at one time. They had 300 ships, and those ships had 180 oarsmen. You can do the math. That's a lot of people who are trained in combat, especially on the high seas. And when we remember Greece, we remember that every part of Greece is pretty much accessible by the ocean, right? Greece is very easy to navigate around and to move around. It's hard to navigate around on land. It's much easier on the sea. They're getting control of that. They're also getting control of major trade routes. Now, we haven't talked much about trade with the Greeks, but the Greeks really, really practiced trade. In fact, the Delian League had great trade routes set up between Egypt in itself. Egypt, again, the breadbasket of the ancient world, was able to provide those materials that are essential, the grains that are essential for life, because they're not growing much in Greece, but you have trade partners that are growing a lot of grains. You can easily sell down there and pick those up and bring them back to Athens. So Athens has established this huge trade network. They're democratic in nature because Athens is a democratic state. They look at other states that are not democratic as barbarian or as lesser, and therefore they are very democratic. They're opposed to monarchy and the power of the Persian Empire. They're still afraid that the Persians are going to come back to Greece. There's no reason not to believe it. Why wouldn't they? They've come back twice, or they've shown up twice, so why not be prepared for the next invasion? And so that's really their true thing, is they look at as monarchies as being tyrannical, and the ability to put down tyrants or tyrannical regimes is to have an army strong enough to defeat them, or a navy strong enough to defeat them. One of the great blessings of the Delian League is their strong navy. They can defeat an invasion that has any type of sea vessel contingent, right? They can put down any navy in the world at this point. Now, the Peloponnesian League, on the other hand, has a large, well-trained army. Each state was an oligarchy, meaning they had a few very important families in control of the government, and they're opposed to the democracies in the Delian League. They look at the democracies as the ones that are quite tyrannical. They look at people being voted into power as being more tyrannical, and so they refuse to recognize those groups. Now, the Peloponnesian League is very conservative. They're very much focused on their own areas of influence. Sparta's really not going to grow a large navy. They will by the end of the war, but that's with money that they get from other states, specifically from Persia. So we see this focus and this change and this shift from being focused on, staying cloistered to, all right, now we got to adapt a little bit to be able to defeat the Athenians. All right, this is a great example of the Delian League. Now, everything in red is the Delian League, except we don't have in red, and it should be in red here, the area of Attica. That would have been in red. I'm actually going to go ahead and, oops, that's yellow. I want that in red. All right, this region here, specifically Athens, this should all be in red. You can see that I'm coloring it in for you. All right, that was all part of the Delian League. The Delian League actually was pretty massive when you think about all the islands that were a part of it. They even tried to invade into Sicily, which would have been a part of the Delian League as well. All right, moving on. So the Delian League broken down. It had Athens. So these are some of the member states: Athens, Aegina, Byzantium, Chios, Lesbos, Lindos, Naxos, Paros, Samos, Thebes, and Tassos. The list does not include all the city-states who donated money. Many, many more donated lots of money. These are just some that donated troops. And then in the Peloponnesian League, where it's led by Sparta, of course, but members are Corinth, Cytherea, Melos, Pylos, Mentia, Elis, Epidirius, Boeotia, who joined kind of late, Leucada, and Ambraca. Corinth provided the majority of the ships to the alliance. They provided a lot of the money to the alliance. Sparta, the other end of that. Athens, of course, was the leader of the Delian League. Thebes is in and out. At one time, they're a part of it, and then the other part, they're like, oh, we don't want to be a part of this craziness. Here we go, moving forward. So, again, this is a better picture of it. The red being, of course, the Spartans and the Peloponnesian League, and then the yellow is the Delian League. All right, so we changed colors But you can see places like Byzantium up here in the top right corner. You can see all types of locations. Then you can see battles all over the place. All right. So in 454, we finally reach our boiling point. The League's treasury was transferred to Athens, and the alliance had become an empire in all but name. So in 454, the treasury where the money was stored for the League was transferred to Athens. That became the official banking site for the League. And for the next 20 years, Athens used its power to gain control over members of the League. And when members tried to leave the League, Athens would simply just invade and just beat them down. They'd bludgeon them down back into submission, make them sign new treaties, make them sign new deals, and with that, they were able to gain better control of the regions. And then tensions with the leagues began to reach an all-time high in 433 BC when Athens signed a treaty of mutual protection with Corsica, one of the few other cities that had a major navy in the area or on its own. Corsica became Corsica today. Corcyra became Corsica today. One of the few cities that had a navy of its own. So it was only one of the few other city-states that actually had a large navy, and Athens made a deal with that. The Peloponnesian League said, that can't happen. It's just too powerful of an alliance. And so that really allowed the war to begin. And then we can see, of course, there's going to be a war fought between hoplites. All right, the Peloponnesian War is best classified as the war between the elephant and the whale. Now, the Peloponnesian War actually starts before 431. In fact, tensions had risen in between Corinth and Athens before this time. For 20 years prior to this, they had what historians call the First Peloponnesian War, which would have been the war between Corinth and Athens, in which neither side had a major victory. It was mostly posturing and little minor invasions, really not very impressive at all. So most people, when they talk about the Peloponnesian War, they're talking about the Second Peloponnesian War, which was from 431 to 404 BC. Now, the principal start and strategy of the war was to send an army every year, annually, during the summer, to attack Athenian lands. Starting in 431, they would create as much destruction as possible. They'd burn farms, chop down olive trees and vineyards. However, the actual effect on this had little effect on the Athenian economy. The city could always be resupplied via the city's port of Piraeus. And I'm going to show you guys a map of Piraeus and why it's so important today. But it really wasn't a great strategy. It really wasn't very an effective strategy. The Spartans just used it. So they'd come in every summer, they'd burn down a bunch of fields, they'd burn down towns. This is when we start to see atrocities start growing up. The Greeks had no qualms about massacring villages. They had no problems with wiping out populations or taking them all as slaves. They really had no issue with that. Athens had a slave mine, a silver mine, or a silver mine run by slaves, and the Spartans went in there and they freed them all. It really was quite a barbaric time for Greece. I mean, Greece is really going, hey, we're just going to wipe you out. Why let civilians live? So they went after civilian populations during this time. All right. Of course, you were going to have naval battles as well. All right. Athens used its navy to sail around the Spartan armies. They really didn't want to engage on open ground. They knew they couldn't beat the Spartans on the field of battle, so instead they just sail around them, land their army behind the Spartans, and destroy Spartan towns and farms and villages. And the Spartan army would have to return home to defend their defenseless city. Their city had a lot of slaves, and so they had to return home to make sure that the slaves didn't revolt. At the same time, the Athenians would eventually build little fortifications on the Spartan coast, and the slaves would flee to those, or at least try to. Now, Athens also would blockade all of the Peloponnesus. So they're trying to prevent shipping from entering the Peloponnesus, and they'd set up blockades around the outside of it to prevent ships from coming and supplying it. For the most part, battles were very few. There were very few major battles. Athens refused to engage Sparta on the open field of battle. Sparta, for the most part, could not field a major naval force, so they tried not to fight on the water either. It really was a quite a long war. Lasting at least 30 years. There was one peace break in between, or attempted peace break in between That did not go through. There is a story that the women helped broker a deal between the Spartans and the Athenians at one point. That they said, look, um, you're going to have peace or you're not going to have kids, basically. And the Spartans and Athenians goes, we kind of need children, so we'll stop the war. Um, for a little bit, I don't know how accurate that story is. I think Herodotus came up with that, so we don't really know. I remember my history professor telling me that story years and years and years ago when I was a little bit older than you guys. All right, this is one of the most important parts of the Peloponnesian War. This is the connection between Pacyros, the Athenian port, and Athens. And if you take a good look, what you're going to see is something called the North Long Wall and the South Long Wall. What Athens had done in the classical period is they kind of suspected a war was going to happen. And in order to prevent themselves from being destroyed, they built a long system of walls connecting Athens to Pacyros. And so it was really easy for the Athenians to sail directly in, unload their boats, and move all of their equipment safely, all their food safely, all the way to Athens. So really quite an awesome invention that the Athenians made. It looks like to me, if you took out uh, the scale, maybe 3 miles long or more on each side, maybe 6 miles long. I forgot exactly how long the distance is, but it's really not that far. But the Athenians, what a great defensive strategy. This is why they knew they could outlast, and the Spartans would have to fight around the outside of that wall. They burned villages on either side and try to draw the Athenians out, but the Athenians never would. All right, now, guys, what you're going to do is we're going to watch this video. We're not going to be able to do it. We are going to be able to do it on this. Fantastic. So um, I want you to watch this video and see what happens. Maybe we can't watch it on this. It doesn't look like it. Oh, maybe if I take off my highlighter. Oh, we are. While we do that, I'm going to take my computer over to its charger. I'll be back in a second.
With the port city of Piraeus supplied by sea, even if an invading army would destroy the surrounding countryside and farmland. This hostile period ended with the so-called 30 Years' Peace between the two city-states that would last for less than half of its intended duration. Despite this peace, hostility between Athens and Corinth continued, and in 431 BC, Corinth successfully convinced Sparta and the Peloponnesian League to declare war on Athens, with the goal of ending the burgeoning Athenian Empire. The first phase of the Second Peloponnesian War, commonly referred to as simply the Peloponnesian War, is known as the Archidamian War, where Sparta pursued a policy of pillaging the countryside around Athens in an attempt to provoke a pitched battle. The Athenians had anticipated the Spartan strategy and had organized a continuous flow of grain shipments from Egypt and colonies on the Aegean and Black Sea.
So remember how important those trade routes absolutely are,
to blockade the
moving around the
preventing
blockades.
trade and supplies, while opportunistically raiding Sparta's allies. While initially the Athenians seemed to be maintaining the upper hand in this asymmetric war of attrition that had been carefully planned for years by the Athenian statesman Pericles, the population from the surrounding countryside.
Very clear, but when he said asymmetric war of attrition, what he's trying to tell you guys, breaking this down a little bit, is that both sides are trying to outlast the other. War of attrition means, hey, look, I'm going to try to outlast you. That could be, hey, we have, a certain amount of beef jerky, right? We each have 5 beef jerkies, and we're going to see who can make it last the longest. That's basically a war of attrition, right? It's who can last the longest with the resources they have. Who's going to say, hey, look, I'm tired of this war first. You're going to wear each other down until one side gives up. Let's get back to it.
Poured in behind the safety of the Athenian walls in the early stages of the war. This had been taken into account beforehand, and wealthy Athens had more than enough food flowing into the crowded city to feed everyone. What had not been taken into account was tainted grain shipments carrying plague, which rapidly spread through the overcrowded city. Initially, the city was resilient, inspired by the charismatic rhetoric of Pericles. An estimated 1 in 4 Athenians succumbed to the plague, including Pericles and his sons, before it had run its course. At the height.
So, an extremely deadly plague that hit Athens. A plague, guys, is a series of diseases. It's another word we use today more clearly is pandemic. A pandemic is right below a plague. But they're saying 1 in every 4 people got sick. Some estimates as high as 2 in every 3. So that's a huge section of the population that is dying from this plague that is in Athens because they took grains from Egypt that had the plague in them. All right, so even that trade system could cause severe issues, right? The diseases spread. That's one thing about humanity is we spread disease very, very easily and very well. And diseases that may be non-native. For example, you had seen a lot of outbreaks of tuberculosis in the Western civilizations. You had seen diseases run their course through the Western civilizations prior to Columbus finding the Americas. Unbeknowingly to them, they brought with them these incredible diseases that the peoples of the Americas had never experienced, had never had before. And we watched those diseases absolutely ravage the Native American populations of North and South and Central Americas during the time of colonization. So we see that disease has been a theme throughout human history and continues to be one today.
Mercenaries refused to fight for Athens, and even the Spartans ceased to campaign near Athens for fear of catching the plague. Ironically, the masterfully planned Athenian blockade of the Peloponnese had protected Sparta and its allies from receiving any of the plague-tainted grain. The Athenian survivors adopted a much more aggressive strategy, greatly increasing their raids and building fortified outposts along the Peloponnesian coast. The Helots, Spartan slaves that outnumbered them 10 to 1, were encouraged to run away to these outposts, which put pressure on Sparta to defend the home front. This phase of the war ended with the 50-year Peace of Nicias, which never really went into full effect, with both belligerents raiding each other through proxies from the onset, and eventually directly. In 415 BC, the Athenians devised a plan they believed would bestow upon themselves an overwhelming advantage: the conquest of the fabulously wealthy city-state of Syracuse on the island of Sicily, who, along with Athens and Carthage, controlled the lion's share of Mediterranean trade. Led by the young charismatic Athenian statesman Alcibiades, the expedition ended in disaster, with Athens losing over 10,000 hoplites and 2/3 of her navy. Ships could be rebuilt, but the 30,000 professional oarsmen could not be replaced. This was followed by further disasters, Sparta freed 20,000 Athenian slaves in the city's silver mines. Athens then raised the tribute from her vassals, which caused widespread revolt in Ionia, for which this final stage of the war is named. The Athenian general Alcibiades, fearing retribution for his failure, switched sides and fought for Sparta, who began to receive vast.
All right, so Alcibiades was originally an Athenian general. He planned the invasion of Sicily. Other historians have claimed that Alcibiades left before the invasion. He was basically shunned or voted out, and he left before. He's claiming that after the Sicilian defeat, that's when he left. Regardless of when he left, he ends up joining the Spartans and will lead the Spartans in several major transitions in their military.
Source of money from the Persian Empire, who viewed the Athenian Empire as a greater threat. With this, Sparta built up its fleet and combined.
Let me go back through that again. He said that the Persians actually started sending money to the Spartans. They looked at the Delian League as more of a threat, and so they sent a bunch of money to the Spartans to build up a better military to defeat, or better navy to defeat the Athenians. Here we go.
With his Corinthian allies, decisively defeated the Athenian navy at Aegospotami. Athens, now effectively without a navy, was besieged by Sparta and promptly surrendered. Spartan hegemony over the Greek world would be short-lived. Its most precious resource, Spartan warriors, had become far too low to maintain an empire. And after a series of smaller wars, in the aftermath of the Peloponnesian War, Philip of Macedon, the father of Alexander the Great, was able to conquer the decimated Greek city-states.
Okay, so we're going to let that in there. What the outcome of the Peloponnesian War is? Well, the outcome is that Philip of Macedon, who by all accounts the Greeks viewed him as a barbarian, was able to invade. And not only was he able to invade Athens and Greece, he's able to take it over and put them under his control. Then we'll see Alexander does the same, and soon we'll see that the Greeks under the Macedonians will conquer the world. All right, guys, that's it for today on this video. Thank you so much for paying attention. If you have any questions, please let me know. My help sessions today are from basically 8:30 to 9:30 and 1 to 2. You can catch me then, but you can also reach out to me. You can catch me then on YouTube, but you can also reach out to me via a chat message. All right, guys, I will catch you later. See ya.